Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Hey, thank you so much for joining us here on our YouTube channel for episode number 1077. Today, we are profiling a book, an author, Redefining Rich by Shannon Hayes. I am super excited for this episode. I've been super excited for this interview. I don't have a lot of authors on the show. I get a lot more offers and people suggesting they come on as guests than I accept. When this one popped up, I was immediately intrigued by the title. I talk about redefining retirement on the show all the time, and then I get this idea for a guest for the show from Shannon Hayes, Redefining Rich. And so I started looking into it and reading it, and I was immediately captivated by it. I love the story, and I love all the different parallels from what we talk about here on the Off-Farm Income Podcast to what Shannon has gone through and what she's writing about in this book. It is farm-related, even though the title doesn't necessarily say that, but it is definitely farm-related, agriculturally related, and it just epitomizes the different concepts that we talk about when we talk about transitioning our lifestyles and why to do that on the Off-Farm Income Podcast. So I'm very excited to have Shannon on the show today, and we're going to get that started for you right now. Shannon, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to speak with you as well. I've been very excited to speak with you, and in the midst, you and your people reached out to me and offered to come on the show, and I'll tell you, and I know you have your own podcast as well. I get a lot of those offers, and I look at them. Most of them I say no to. Yours, I was automatically intrigued just by the title of your new book, Redefining Rich. I talk about on the show all the time, redefining retirement, and here you are redefining rich. And so I was intrigued from the get-go, started reading through it, and I actually was down at the local coffee shop I'll do my office work at sometimes, and the ladies down there were like, "What were you doing? We couldn't even make fun of you. We couldn't get your attention or anything like that." So I was definitely intrigued by some of the concepts that you were talking about here. So I have really been looking forward to this, and then of course in the interim, I got COVID, and so everything got put off, but here we are finally. So looking.
Yeah, but that's all content. That's all material for future creativity, and you know that you're going to turn it into something fantastic because that's your job.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes. We'll see where that goes. So
I'm glad to see that you're up and feeling better.
Thank you. Well, man, I'm sitting here looking at your background. Your living room looks like something that I would want to rent to go on vacation. It looks like an awesome place.
That's because I have teenagers who are very sensitive to what it looks like behind me. So when they know I'm going to sit down, I have one who, bless her heart, is an absolute slob, and then two who are embarrassed on her behalf. So I'm not much of a housekeeper myself, but man, do I have kids who really, really come through for me.
Well, I'm just talking about the wood stove and the stone behind it and the cabiny looking feel. Man, it looks like a wonderful place to watch the snow come down.
It's a wonderful place to be. I have to say, yeah, it's a wonderful place to be. And I remember trying to figure out how I was going to do that. How could I make this so that my life was like this every day? Because there was a time when my husband and I woke up here. We looked at the sunrise coming out this door, and he was freshly fired from his job. He was dismissed for insubordination, for showing up wearing the wrong Halloween costume. And it's its own story. You can find out about that in the book. But we were in this little cabin, and we woke up one snowy morning right after he'd been fired, and the sunrises here are absolutely beautiful. And, we were faced with what we thought was devastation and shame. And we're in a rural community, and around here, nobody would get fired unless they were like doing drugs, robbing, felons, something really serious. And so we were just soaked in shame, thinking we'd have to move away, find a different life someplace else, detach from our family, detach from our neighbors. And that sun came up behind me, and we looked out at that, and we just knew we had to find a way. this was our life, and it was going to start right there at that moment, and we were going to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I read the story in the book, and you've done well, and I'm excited to share it. Can we do this? I would love to have you just give a brief introduction of yourself and a little bit of your story for our audience so they can kind of get to know you.
Sure, sure. Well, my name is Shannon Hayes, and I grew up on Sapbush Hollow Farm, which is just a couple miles down the road here. It was my parents' farm, still is my parents' farm. I guess it's mine now too. Um, and I'm here in upstate New York in the Northern Catskill Mountains, and I grew up in the farm crisis. And I often say that kids were pushed out of the way. Farm kids were pushed out of the way like weeds in the spray line of herbicides. It was considered a go nowhere future. And so while I grew up on a farm, and I had these Appalachian neighbors where they were sort of my compadres. They were an elderly Appalachian couple that I would spend all my free time at, living here in the hills. And I was going to school down in the valley that was very college and career focused and very discouraging of the agricultural future that was here. But I couldn't let go of it. I absolutely could not let go of it. So I was a good girl. I was a good student. I went off. I got a PhD in sustainable agriculture and community development. I thought maybe I could teach and farm, find some way to make it work. And then realized my heart, I didn't want to go to a job. I just couldn't do it. And my husband, he was fired from his job. And we decided that the best future for us was not to go chasing another professional career somewhere, but to put down roots, commit to what we most wanted in our lives, and find a way to make it work. And we decided that we were at our most economically insecure when we had full-time employment. So we abandoned that idea in favor of diversity, and we built this life. And we just, one stone after the next, one brick into the mortar after the next, very slowly built a life for ourselves that's very unconventional. We don't work real hard. We felt that one of the things that was not great about agriculture was it reveres overwork. And we felt that was one of the things that was driving the next generation away. So we try not to work too hard.
Okay.
It does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
So with my parents, we raise grass-fed meats. We do pastured pork, grass-fed beef. And then we have a little cafe here in town. In town is it's a crossroads, very tiny. And it's open one day a week and from 9 until 2, because that's what we feel is the sweet spot. And we want everybody coming on the same day so that everybody sees each other and spends time together. So we only open it one day. And it's a hopping cafe where we do farm to table meals, best breakfast sandwich around. And then in addition to that, we do some vacation rentals to have some income that's a little bit more passive, so that when we are not well and we need to lie on the couch for a few days, as you might be familiar with right now, that we can still make sure the bills are paid. So between the livestock and the cafe and the vacation rentals, some long-term rentals, we've just slowly expanded by partnering with my parents, but keeping the generations together. We've built our wealth and made it so that nobody does have to work too hard. We do crazy things like take vacations and spend our morning in the coffee drinking woods. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, that is crazy. A vacation, my goodness. Now, I enjoyed, by the way, there's a waterfall you and your husband like to sit by and have your coffee in the woods. I like that image. It's a very nice image. I want to go back to something you just said before I lose it. You talked about the fact that you and your husband found that when you were employed full-time in regular, or we'll say conventional jobs, that's when you were the most economically insecure. Why was that?
Well, what I just told you about, just in the first couple minutes we spoke, is probably about 4 different forms of income that we have here. And that is just the ones I just spoke about. Speak to me a little bit longer and you'll find out about all the other different little things that are going on. And what I realized the day after he got fired, and we didn't know how we were going to, it was actually the same day that the first mortgage bill came.
Oh
So it
boy.
was a momentous day. It was just a real bell ringer of a day. And it was a great moment because I realized that our entire future was contingent upon who my boss pleased. Now, I was still a grad student at that time. I was employed at the university getting my grad degree. And so we were really reliant on Bob's income. And that mortgage getting paid was reliant on one person not getting mad. And then you start to realize, well, it could have been some other person, who decided they had it with you. Well, now, our customer newsletter goes out to about 3,000 people. And you might find if you spend enough time here talking to me that I do manage to say things that are offensive from time to time. But usually I only make a couple people mad at once. And there's usually maybe a couple thousand more who are still okay with what I'm doing and they're willing to ride it out. That's the beauty of diversification. You don't have to worry about getting just one customer angry at you.
Right.
You can be more true to yourself and accept that, yes, some people are going to fall away. Some people are going to come in, and that helps even things out. But when all your eggs are in one basket with one full-time job, that's dangerous. The other thing that I discuss at length in the book, and that ties to this, is full-time jobs are expensive. They're very expensive. When you start deducting the kinds of taxes out of those jobs, if you don't have a business income to write off against that, to mollify that tax impact, that's the most expensive form of income there is. So it was not only insecure because all our eggs were in one basket, it was also expensive because the tax bills were extremely high.
Okay.
We still pay tax bills now, but we pay them all locally because it's all property taxes.
Sure. No, and I think you're right. I understand that as well. Now that I'm diversified with multiple different businesses and a farm, our adjusted tax rate every year is significantly low compared to what it would be otherwise in our past life. Living in the city, no write-offs, both working two full-time jobs for employers. So I know exactly what you're saying there. And I love what you're saying about that mind shift, that transition you went through, because you do realize at some point, once you start thinking entrepreneurially, you realize that you are more secure if you've got several hundred customers, or in your case, several thousand, because you've got to get fired a lot of times before you lose all your income versus that one job. Who knows what could happen? Layoffs, cutbacks, anything. And it's just that one time, and then 100% of it is gone. And so it's just a mindset shift on where the risk really lies.
Yeah. Yeah. And a secure paycheck for me is just not worth the price. There is something else that I think should have indicated the entrepreneurial mindset too, because I should mention, in all fairness, that after he got fired, I did get an opportunity to get a job. I was offered a job to start professing, if you will, at the local university. And he and I went camping that weekend, and I was just terrible. I was crabby. I was nasty and pouting and surly. And we got home, and we were freshly married too. We were newlyweds, and poor Bob, he was blanched. Like, he didn't know what he had gotten into. Who was this woman that he'd married? And he finally said, "What is wrong with you?" And I had tentatively agreed to take this position. And I just burst out crying and I don't want to go to work. And he's looking at me, he's like, "You just did a PhD at Cornell University. What did we just spend the last 4 years working toward? Why did you want to do this?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to write. I wanted to farm." "Well, why did you go through the whole degree?" And I said, "Well, I thought I couldn't make it." And his words to me, which were just a great gift, was, I didn't marry you for you to say that.
Oh,
I
really?
married the one who wants to be the farmer and the writer. So I said, "Well, I thought we would do that for retirement. I didn't think we'd do it as a young couple." And he said, "I'm not in it for that game. You either get on the stick now and start going, or, we got to renegotiate some deals here." So I realized that the promise of a job, entry level at that time was maybe $45,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And, you slowly grow up from there. But it was a steady paycheck. And I realized that the promise of that steady paycheck could be there. And I could always have that money coming in. Or I have this thing all over. I've just got like notes all over that. I'm always figuring out like how to make the next $1,000,000, right? How to do it. How about this enterprise? How about that enterprise? I'm always doing like cost benefit projections on the back of napkins. And I've always got my phone out running things, my magic calculator. I'm always thinking of new ideas. And I realized I would give up any steady paycheck to have the buzz of that high of what could be possible. And I could, for some reason, it seemed like it was easier to live on possibility than the definitive nature of predictability. I don't know why I was that way, but some people, they jump out of airplanes. Some people, they're into cliff climbing. I don't know. But for me, I needed that in my life. I needed to always be thinking about what's another way to make something possible? What's another way to make something possible? And I think that's tied to, well, that's just a thrill. I'm sure if you're doing what you're doing, that there's this thrill. Can I make this work? Right. I don't know. They say I can't. Boy, that means I really got to try. But I think more to it, for me, I would love to grab this computer and run around and show you the stone walls and the hillsides and the pastures, but I know you could do the exact same thing. I just felt like I was put here to make this place, to be part of this place, to raise children who would care about this place, who would care about the neighbors, who would restore the community that always was here and continue to make this a place that people love. Because when people love a place, they protect it, they put their hearts there, they invest there. And I realized I was far more comfortable with economic insecurity if I could be working toward that dream. Mm-hmm. Because if I had to go take a job someplace just to keep a roof over my head, and I wasn't working at what the true calling in my heart was, it wasn't worth it to me. It wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I have had the exact same experience as you in that respect. And I think what you're describing is there's phases of this development. So we advocate for entrepreneurship on this show all the time. And we tell people, if you really want to farm, you really want to live this lifestyle, you really should consider entrepreneurship. And here's all the logistical reasons why it makes sense to do this. But then there's something that happens to you after you actually become one. And that is that buzz you're talking about. And I tell you what, it's addictive. It really is, but in a very good way, because it drives you and it makes you reach for other things. It makes you really explore your innovative ideas and see what can work, what cannot. And it helps you develop good things. Just like with you now with multiple books, you've got a great message in Redefining Rich. I'll toot my own horn a little bit, but the Off-Farm Income podcast, when I first became an entrepreneur and I left my full-time job, the thought of starting a podcast didn't even exist in my brain. But it's just one of those things of going down the path and chasing that. Well, what about this? Well, what about starting that? And now we've reached thousands, almost millions of people on this show and shared our message. And so there's something, because I just want to take a moment and highlight what you're saying, because I talk about this on the show all the time. We encourage people to explore entrepreneurship if this is the lifestyle that they're looking for. But man, once you get into it, you find yourself invigorated by work and everything else doesn't matter. You're doing what you want to do every single day and it's giving you energy, versus that job that you don't like, it's sucking your energy away. It's such a polar opposite. It's almost unexplainable.
Yeah. And I felt too, one of my quests, which came out in this book, was to figure out there are certain skills that you need. There are certain skills, like you need to understand the nuances of a diversified income. It's not, we used to think in farming here, diversified income meant you didn't just have sheep, you had sheep and beef and pigs, and then you added chickens, and that was diversifying income. Right. Well, that's not diversifying income, because you're working physically all the time to do all that.
Right.
What I started realizing is if I was going to become an entrepreneur, I had to develop a certain set of skills that would work with any kind of business that I tried. And that's what I try to get into in the book. So you got to look at your entrepreneurial work, and you got to look at other ways that you can get the income to come in so that your energy is restored, so that your finances are working, so that you can get sick for 2 weeks if you have to get sick for 2 weeks. Um, and then you need to develop certain tactics. You learn certain tricks on how to market what you do, how not to be ashamed of what you do because you're asking for a living wage and you don't have a paycheck just quietly slipped to you every week for showing up. And then how to negotiate with people and how to do things like say no and protect what you're here for and protect that family, because we can all get kind of crazy in this lifestyle and we can think we can take on tons of things. And part of learning how to build that endurance, I found, is learning how to set those boundaries and protect what's sacred to me.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the book a little bit more. It's titled Redefining Rich. The question hanging out there is then, okay, what's the new definition of rich? How did you redefine it? Could you explain that to everybody?
Yeah. I started realizing a couple things. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in this farm, and I've always been part of Statbush Hollow Farm. And then my parents started to age. They went through a lot of different surgeries in a year. And there was always this slow eking toward a transition that was happening. And then one day, my mom had major heart surgery. They came out of that. My parents were shell shocked. And it was like, Shannon, you got to take over yesterday. And I had to grab everything, start all over again, and get it going. And then did what every next generation farmer does, is reconcile. Oh my God, we're bleeding. How much money? And then I was running this cafe at the same time, and it was a lot of physically grueling work. I spent so many days on hands and knees, cleaning toilets, cleaning floors. You do everything in this line of work. And I was feeling very sorry for myself. I was realizing just how hard it was to make payroll, to pay the feed bill. And I was getting really angry. I was getting angry that my insurance guy got paid, that the licensing for ag and markets, all that stuff got paid, that all the suppliers got paid, the feed bill, the vet bill, they all got paid. And then there I was at the end of the day feeling poor. And you'll find if you read my books that I tend to solve a lot of problems by going camping. I have been disappearing into the woods a lot. And on this particular trip, we just basically, hung a sign, sent a message out to everybody saying, gone fishing. We disappeared. And we disappeared 1 mile up the road, just far enough so that cell phones would not work.
Okay.
And we spent 48 hours looking for every swimming hole within a 5-mile radius with our kids. And I spent a lot of time just sitting and thinking. And I realized first lesson about wealth was that I chose the problem. I knew going into this what everyone had said, that farming is a losing venture.
Okay.
Farming's hard. And I chose that, and I was missing something really important if I suffered through that. Because what I had actually done was chosen my own adventure. My adventure was to prove this wrong. And you start to realize, if you look back over your life, it was the times when you were struggling that you look back with like, oh, wasn't that a beautiful time? It's so sweet. I really love that. And I realized I was going to miss something if I spent these years struggling, feeling like it was wrong. The truth was, this was an adventure. We had stepped on this, my husband and I. We joined my parents, and we were in this. And that's when I started realizing, I used to say, the problem is the profit. That was my first lesson. The problem is the profit. The problem is that I am going to wake up every single morning doing what I want to do, just as you said. And it's not solving what I want to solve. It's working on the problems that I want to work on. And then I started realizing that if I'm working on the problems that I want to work on. And the fact that the farm isn't wealthy, I started looking around going, well, the bank numbers were low. Why was I keep coming here? Why did I keep showing up? And I started realizing, well, I had this beautiful, poetic, Herculean idea that I was here to save the land, to save the community, to save all this, and to keep it agricultural, to keep it wild. Well, wait a minute. If I'm doing all this saving, then I realized, when do I get to play in it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized that my other profit was there all along. If I was into saving all these things, it's because I love them. It's because I love to walk barefoot across my pastures, because I love the feel of stone walls in my hands. And I recognized that one of the things I was doing wrong was not taking the pay that was here. And I started realizing that's the fresh water. I was always taking the good food, of course, but that's also the fresh air and the time with my family. And I started recognizing that I had a wealth portfolio, not just a financial portfolio, but a true wealth portfolio. And I was rich in a lot of other ways. And that richness was actually providing all the things that money didn't. And then I started recognizing the actual money that I needed to live was very tiny in comparison when I had all these other things that I had, whether it was amazing food every single day. I'm always with people that I like, so I'm not trying to get away from them.
Mm-hmm.
I've always got time to go into the woods. So then you start, it just shifts your mindset to go from thinking of, I'm a poor farmer, to, damn, I'm really wealthy.
Mm.
I'm seriously rich. And that mindset of switching from, for me, my life is hard, to, oh, no. I've got it good.
Mm-hmm.
That changes a lot when you're running a business, how you run the business and how you look at every decision that you make. Because I started discovering I cared about cash flow, but it was the other stuff that I really cared about. And then as I focused on that, those bank accounts, they just started to grow. That was crazy. But you start making different decisions, and you start making decisions to increase the wealth of your family in a different way, to spend more time with them. You relax, you get more creative, and you just fell more deeply in love with what you do and have that energy to keep coming back and keep working on it, including those problems that got you into this to begin with.
All right. There's a lot you said there that I think is but I think it's very important, and I want to try and recall most of it or all of it if I can. The change in the mindset. Let me ask you about materialism and consumerism really quick. Is part of that change in that mindset giving that up and getting off of that kind of hamster wheel?
You make it sound like it's a diet. I think I used to actually think of it like that, like I had to resist consumerism.
Okay.
That it was bad, it was a problem. And I think what happened, and I think you're right, changing the mindset did change that. But it changed it because I started recognizing most deeply what I wanted.
Okay.
So consumerism, to be anti-consumerist, is kind of like saying, don't think of a pink elephant. I'm resisting that. And I guess you could call me anti-consumerist, but I'm not actually anti-consumerist. I just don't have time, because I would far rather go find a swimming hole someplace. I would far rather sit outside in the woods and watch the snow fall in winter.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is I'd far rather, sit outside and drink with my friends than go into some fancy glitzy bar someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is the riches in my life became so profound, so alluring, so satisfying, that I don't even think about going to shop or what I would like to buy. It just, and I think, did I become anti-consumerism and benefit financially? Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
We're not trying to substitute anything here.
gotcha. And that's interesting you ended with that, because that's just what I wanted to go to next. I noticed with myself when I was in the wrong fit. So before I had gone through my mindset shift, before I had, taken the leap, made the change, started my own business, bought a farm, done all of that. Before I did all of that, I was spending a lot of money on things. And now I look back and I go, well, I was self-medicating. I was in the wrong place. It was the wrong fit. I wasn't right. I wasn't happy. And so I had 3 days off a week because I worked a 4-10 schedule. And for those 3 days, it was going to be an epic camping trip. It was going to be riding four-wheelers. It was going to be doing something. It was going to be a fancy pickup or whatever it may be, because I was numbing that pain of doing something that wasn't right for me. And so as you were talking about that, and you mentioned the fact that once you had that mind shift change, all of a sudden your savings started to increase, and you're like, well, that's weird. I thought about that same thing, where when we bought our farm and then when I started a business, all of a sudden I didn't need a travel trailer. I didn't need four-wheelers. I didn't need a fancy pickup. I didn't need any of that type of stuff. And it was like, oh, I thought this was going to be much more difficult financially, but actually I'm not spending nearly what I once did. Did we have a similar experience there?
I think so. I love to think about the ads that show up this time of the year for outdoor living rooms.
Okay.
Like these beautiful outdoor couches with outdoor fireplaces and outdoor rocking chairs and outdoor living. And I used to stare at those, I don't know, 25 years ago, whatever. God, I'm getting old. But I used to stare at these things and aspire to have my outdoor living room or a beautiful living room couch even. And then one day I went, what they're selling furniture, right? When you get these flyers in the mail or you see them in aspirational magazines, they're selling furniture. What they're marketing is the opportunity to sit. And that's what's moving the furniture. And I realized I don't actually want the furniture. I want to sit down.
Yeah.
And we actually have these two folding camp chairs that fit in our backpacks that we take out every single morning in the woods. And we've logged more hours in these little folding camp chairs. And I have a couple favorite rocks. Once I realized I seriously want to sit down, then that stuff just fades away. And you look at it and you go, oh my God, I can't imagine what a pain in the rear it would have to be to own this stuff and how to keep up with this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, there's a couple things that came up in the book I wanted to make sure and ask you about. One was you used the term and you talk about the dysfunctional economy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I talk about two different economies and I see them running parallel. And one of them is an extractive economy and one is a life-serving economy. And the extractive economy is mainstream economics based on scarcity thinking. Mainstream economics is based, the simple principle is you take something, you make it scarce, then people will pay money for it, and suddenly you have an economic system. And scarcity is the foundation of conventional economics. And I don't really think very much of it. I don't like worrying about something running out. And I think scarcity economics has gotten us into a lot of problems with the environment. It's caused the depletion of rural resources. So I'm not a big fan. And then I realized that there was something in a life-serving economy that works much better, and it runs parallel. And I call it abundance economics, where you take something and you realize it's of value and you invest in it. And it starts, though, with true wealth, those things I talked about: clean water, good relationships, fertile soil, good food. That's a foundational wealth, and you invest in that. And as you go around the cycle, what you're trying to do is not make those things scarce, but create more of them. And when you do that and you create more of them, then you're creating more opportunity. And that's more opportunity to invest, once again, in true wealth. And so true wealth expands. And then more people can get involved, and more people can have true wealth, more people get good food, more people enjoy clean water, more people have fertile soil to benefit from. And therefore, we have more true wealth again. So those understanding those two different economic structures, I think, is very important when you're going into entrepreneurship, is to figure out how to build those opportunities. A lot of people think that, what I do is completely unrealistic. Nobody can do it. Nobody can have this kind of life. But it's a lot of this life-serving economy, abundance, economic thinking that leads to that kind of path and to the ventures that we choose.
Okay. Let me ask you about that really quick. You brought up the fact that a lot of people think that it's not realistic, it can't be done, that type of thing. A lot of people, if they were to critique you, and I'm sure you've heard this, they would say, well, your parents had a farm. You had something already right there. How in the world do we do that? And I fight this battle on the show all the time too, trying to help people solve this riddle of how can you get started with that major piece of the puzzle here that is a huge obstacle to overcome. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's easier to talk to you because you're dealing with farmers. So that's where I'm on my strongest ground. The first thing I would say is just about everything worth doing is impossible at the outset.
Okay.
So let's just agree to that. And I will tell you, back in 1992, when I was graduating, the idea of farming was impossible. And then I went on and got a grad degree in it. And the reason I went on and got a grad degree was because farming was impossible. You couldn't make a living. I grew up, like I said, in the farm crisis. So I've seen that thinking before.
Mm-hmm.
And when I decided to come back, people thought I had a drug problem. Why else would I come home? What a loser thing to do. There was no future here. My husband had been fired and I wanted to farm. I mean, that was just about as outlandish as it was going to get. So right now, sitting where we are, it looks like, oh yeah, you just got it all handed to you, honey. Well, believe me, I didn't. And my parents wanted for me in the worst way to just go get a job and get a future. The next thing I would say is there is a first generation in everything.
Yes.
And my parents were the first generation. Are you going to get to do the things I get to do as the second and third generation? I don't know. But it all starts someplace. And to not start because you may not have as much as me or the next person. Well, the only person who's going to lose from that is you, because it's actually the journey that's fun. And it's not whether you have the stone hearth behind the fireplace. It really isn't. Or the outdoor living room set. That stuff is not what's relevant. It's the journey and the start. And so my parents, they did start. The farm that they started on was laughable. It was actually designated by the state as non-viable. It was a joke farm. It was so rocky, it sees frost 11 months out of the year.
Wow.
Okay. So again, it was impossible. And what I have found is then when Bob and I came back, also considered impossible. My father said, they said, oh yeah, sure, you can come back to the farm. Just don't take one dime out of our pockets. So I got to come back to the farm and I got to eat some nice pork, but it was very clear we had to find our own livelihood. So we didn't get it really handed that much. But what we did start to do was this abundance thinking. And part of that wealth was generational. And for other people, it may not be bloodlines helping each other. It may be friends, connections, but the wealth, shared wealth, is magnified wealth. So one of the reasons why we're doing really well here is Bob and I use our skills to do what we do with the cafe to, I'm still covered in paint here this afternoon because we've been out refurbishing and working on stuff. And that gets stacked with Dad's animal husbandry skills. And my daughter has animal husbandry skills, and my other daughter has good management skills. And we stack our wealth and our skill sets. And when we want to buy a piece of property because we think it's a good financial investment, well, look how many shareholders are in it. So it's not one person. If you're going to do it by yourself and try to be your own island, oh yeah, you will fail. Absolutely. But when you have partners who care about each other, you stack that wealth. We only have one pickup truck, and it's an old beat up truck, but all of us use it. So there are 7 active people in my family right now. We only need one. And, you know, we don't need, everyone doesn't have to have their own lawnmower, and everyone doesn't have to have their own set of tools. So you stack those assets. The next thing that happens is, in abundance thinking with a life-serving economy, you keep reinvesting. Well, one of the things that happens is that we attract people who want to learn what we learn.
Mm-hmm.
We had one young woman who came to us. It was impossible for her too. And she came into the family and she worked with us. She worked with us for 5 years. She had student debt. By all counts, what she wanted was completely unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
But last fall, she moved out and started her own farm.
Awesome.
And we played a huge role in that. We have another young couple who's just come in. They've just bought their land. We had an extra chicken coop. We get them their tools. They work with us. We cooperate. Good grief. We cooperate. We work together. They help us to have Sundays off. And meanwhile, they're building another enterprise and they're starting their own life journey. It's about building it. And that building is the journey. And if you want to waste your time sitting around saying how, well, it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me, there's only one person who loses there. And I'm sure you hear it from people all the time. Well, it was easier for you because you had this, easier for you because you had that. Well, whoever doesn't have that, you have a different journey. You have a different adventure. Just don't miss it.
Yep, you're absolutely right. We all start at different places, and those of us starting without any, that look at you and think you have an advantage. There's somebody looking at us thinking we have an advantage. It's just a matter of getting started and not letting anything stop you. Okay, another, and the last thing that I want to get to in the book before we wrap it up, you talked about farms lower the cost of living, or lower your cost of living. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Non-monetary income. So I talk about a couple different forms of income in the farm. And I say, here's like 4 different types of income. You need 3. One of them is, it might be from a job that doesn't suck your soul. That's meaningful work, a true conventional job.
Mm-hmm.
One is employment income. Another is passive income that comes in without you having to work so hard all the time, because when you're self-employed, you're going to be working all the time. And then the fourth one is something called non-monetary income. And this is huge on a farm. I wrote a book back in 2010. It came out called Radical Homemakers, where I talked about people who were able to live on a single income or less. So that delves into it more, but I talk about it in this book too. Non-monetary income is astronomical in my life. Non-monetary income is simple things like the skill sets that I can walk into the kitchen over there at any time, open things up, find something delicious. I know how to cook quickly and put meals out on the table. And I have these teenagers who are working on the farm full time. Part of their non-monetary income is they get fed. It's the fact, one of the things, our non-monetary income is quite high because one of my daughters was born with cerebral visual impairment, and she should not have been able to ride a bicycle. They would have had to have hired special educators that followed her completely through the school. She used to have to walk with a special stick to navigate. I did research and realized that if I became her vision therapist, maybe we could get through this. So I homeschool these kids, and the only other schools that could have taken her would have been $40,000 a year. And we would have had to have sold the farm and moved. So I didn't do that. I realized that part of my non-monetary income was working with this kid every single day. She's down at the farm right now. She's training a donkey. She operates farm machinery. This kid is unbelievable. She can do anything now. And that's non-monetary income. And I didn't have to hire an expert. I got, someone, an expert to just work with me one-on-one, work with her once a week. And we did the work every single day. And my family made sure that I had that time. So some people will call that being a homemaker. But it's a serious, serious economic contribution when you can cook, when you can fix things, when you can refurbish, rebuild, when you can grow food in your garden. All of that stuff really adds up. And in the case of my kids, yeah, when I figured out I'm going to educate them because they had special educational needs, that's huge. It all adds up. And non-monetary income actually in our family is the single largest source of income that we have.
Wow. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So the book, Redefining Rich, people listening, how are they going to be transformed? What's going to change in them after they read this?
Well, if they don't run out and quit their jobs, I think they'll have a really solid game plan on how and when it's going to happen. I think when you come through this book, I think you're going to find you start recognizing when you look at your life differently, you shift your finances by understanding your wealth. So, yes, I do think they're going to be richer just for reading the book. Um, I think I think we all benefit because I think it's going to fire up people to be more entrepreneurial. The economy is stronger when more people are taking responsibility for their own futures in their own hands. And when that happens, you benefit from that. I benefit from that. We become more stable, and then that abundance economy that I was talking about. The more entrepreneurs you have, the more opportunities there are for more people to join that economy. So I think people are going to enjoy their life a lot more. I think they're going to stop and pause at the dinner table and realize, oh, I have some things I really, really love, and that's part of my wealth. And I think that they're going to figure out how that translates into just better business decisions and better life decisions.
I agree. Okay. Shannon, this has been wonderful. For people who want to know more, they want to order the book, all of that, go ahead and plug all the sites they should go to.
Okay, well, if you go to sapbush.com, you go to the blog, you can, there's at the top, you can find out, you can sign up to be part of the Redefining Rich launch team if you want, and get some advanced chapters, and you can participate in book discussions with me. If you would like to follow my work a little bit more closely after you've read the book, there's the podcast, the Hearth of Sapbush Hollow podcast, where I chronicle just about every week how I screw up in my thinking, which we didn't talk about. It's really important to this, isn't it? And yeah, so I would go to sapbush.com where you can learn about how to order the book, how to get an advanced copy, and how to connect more with what we do. If you do Instagram, I'm at sapbushshannon. And on Facebook, it's Shannon Hayes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for writing this book. To me, it's such an important piece. It resonates with so much of what we've been talking about on this show for the last 7 years. I'm thrilled that this book is out there. I'm recommending it to people. And thank you very much for taking the time to come on and talk with me about it.
I'm just really grateful for the time to spend with you today, Matt. And I hope you keep on that road to recovery. Get better soon.
Special thanks to Shannon Hayes for coming on the Off Farm Income podcast today and sharing that great information. And I really meant it when I said at the end of the episode, thank you to her for writing this book. It needs to be written, and I am just very, very happy that it is out there. I'm sharing it with people as we speak, everybody. So we hope you very much enjoyed that interview. And man, we would love to have you click that subscribe button down below and become a subscriber here on the Off Farm Income Podcast YouTube channel. And we'd love to connect with you on social media as well. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, everybody. And hey, until next time, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.